Hello there. I went on eBay again, and last time I went on eBay, I ended up with like 20 different MRE coffee packets. But this time I ended up with something, honestly, maybe a little bit more interesting, and actually older than the MRE packets that we got last time. I have procured for us two quite old booklets that we're gonna go over today. We're gonna try some recipes from, and let me just show you. I think explaining them without showing them might not work very well. These right here are vintage coffee recipe books. And I found two of them. So we have two here and they're from slightly different eras. This one right here, the oldest, which I'm trying not to manhandle too much, is from the 1930s. And this one, which is aptly named Fun with Coffee, is from the 1950s. If I'm talking fast, it is because I'm excited. These little relics, I'm gonna call them, of a different time in coffee have been kind of fun to go over. So today I thought we should just read through them. I thought it would be interesting to kind of see where coffee was then, what it's changed into now, and also, because they're recipe books, I think we should try some of the recipes. So let's start with the oldest. Let's get into this coffee book, this actually iced coffee recipe book from the 1930s. Now, both of these are actually pretty different and were made for pretty different purposes. This book, called Iced Coffee Recipes, was printed in 1934. And this one specifically is related to a brand of coffee. This is a recipe book that was printed to pair with the coffee brand Chase and, here, let me make sure I say this correctly, Chase and Sanborn dated coffee. This was a coffee brand that came in like tins, as a lot of coffee did back then, and to encourage you to buy the coffee and then enjoy said coffee, there were little booklets that also came with them. Now, one thing I want to preface this entire video with, because you might see little glimpses of it and we might have to talk about it a little bit later, is that these are definitely pieces from the time that they existed in, meaning that if you get into these, there's quite a bit of verbiage and imagery and just like stuff that is not good. Frankly, it is stuff that is misogynistic. It is stuff that is often just like overtly racist. There's a lot of just like things in here that are bad. And frankly, that is pretty indicative of like this era of advertising as well. Chase and Sanborn specifically, this company that made this booklet right here, has some pretty awful coffee ads. Some just overtly terrible and bad coffee ads. By looking at these, I don't want to condone any of the stuff that is in here. There's some fun pieces and informational bits that show us how coffee was prepared back then, but just in general, this is kind of an exploration of a time capsule, if you will. Chase and Sanborn. Let's get in here. This entire booklet is specifically made up of iced coffee recipes. This was sold in the summer, as far as I can tell, and really promotes a lot of interesting flavor combinations. One of the really fun things about both of these recipe books are that they not only include coffee recipes, like drinkable coffee recipes, they also include baking recipes. So they showed you a lot of interesting ways to use your coffee, whether it be drinking or also just multi-use around the house. You even have a section of menus for hot days, where they really curate a full picnic list for you. Some of these names are especially appetizing. You had the the smothered ham sandwiches and pimento jelly relish, which I have questions about for sure. You also have grapefruit mayonnaise, which maybe. I'll give that a maybe. However, in the very back here, you kind of have a glossary of ways to make coffee. So let's read through them. Number one, you have drip coffee, and I think I just need to read you this definition. Starting off, it says, first, scald the drip coffee pot with boiling water to warm it. Use 1 heaping tablespoon of Chase and Sanborn's dated coffee to each cup of water. Place coffee in coffee container. Have the water freshly boiled and pour it into the container slowly. Stand the pot on an asbestos mat over a low fire or in a pan of hot water to keep it warm. That is the step I often forget in my own coffee preparation. As soon as the water has dripped through the coffee, remove the upper compartment and cover the pot. Serve at once. That was your drip coffee instruction. We now have percolated coffee. Use 1 heaping tablespoon of Chase and Sanborn's dated coffee to each cup of water. Measure required number of cups freshly boiled water into the percolator. That felt like a bad. Measure required number of cups freshly boiled. That's what it said. Wet the percolator basket with water. Add coffee and insert percolator basket into the pot. Place on fire. Allow water to percolate slowly over the coffee for 7 to 10 minutes. This is all very normal. Let's move on to our next one. We have boiled coffee. Once more, we use 1 heaping tablespoon of Chase and Sanborn's dated coffee to each cup of water. We place coffee in pot and add freshly boiling water. Place on fire and bring to boil. Remove from fire at once and let stand for 5 to 10 minutes. Then Strain from the grounds into another pot or receptacle. I like that they used my favorite word. I don't know if you've noticed on this channel, receptacle is in my like top 5 words of all time. Of course, after the receptacle, prompt straining is important. Coffee that continues to stand in the grounds may become bitter or cloudy. And then number 4, we have after dinner or demi-tasse coffee. Any of the above methods may be used in drinking after dinner coffee, but the brew must be stronger. Use 2 heaping tablespoons of Chase and Sanborn's dated coffee to each cup of water. That sounds powerful. And that's about all this is. It's a fun little recipe book. It has things to make, things to drink, and some information about coffee. We will come back to this shortly. Now let's move onto the 1950s. And this book, which is in much better shape, is called Fun with Coffee. Now, to be exact, this was printed in 1956, and if you'll notice down at the bottom of the pages, it said it was made by the Pan American Coffee Bureau. Now, I did a little bit of digging because that's not a brand necessarily. That sounds like something a little bit more official. And the Pan American Coffee Bureau was essentially a group that was working to spread interest in coffee to middle-class America, essentially. That was their primary demographic. And it was a group that was made up of Central and South American coffee companies that wanted to share coffee up into the Northern America area. They had a ton of ad campaigns around this. It was a huge, this was like got milk for coffee from what I can tell. They had all sorts of printed flyers, all sorts of messaging, but a lot of it revolved around like, have fun with your coffee, try different things with your coffee. A lot of their messaging also kind of evolved around the idea that you should have a coffee break in the middle of your day, like pause, take a rest, enjoy your coffee, and then feel rejuvenated afterwards. Pretty standard stuff nowadays. But they made a lot of interesting printed materials, and I have one of them right here. This is Fun with Coffee, which I endorse. That's just a general message. I think fun with coffee is a good thing. Now, once more, we have a whole bunch of recipes ranging from things that you can drink to also things that you can bake. But we also have a very fun intro section to this book, and I feel like we should just have a little bit of a story time, and I'm just gonna read you a bit of this. What does coffee mean to you? A delectable flavor and a welcome aroma that helps you get going on even the darkest morning, a leisurely after dinner cup that is the perfect accompaniment to a good conversation, the bracing beverage that gives real meaning to your mid-morning coffee break. Perhaps you take special delight in a tall, frosty glass of iced coffee when the temperature climbs. And surely, like most of us, you savor a touch of coffee and ice cream, a favorite cake or dessert. Whatever your preference, one thing is certain: coffee means pleasure and coffee means fun. I'm tickled by this. Moving on, it is our hope that this little book may give you a completely new picture of coffee's exciting possibilities. Here is a collection of tested recipes for variations on coffee for drinking. There are also a lot of tested recipes using coffee in the kitchen, many of which will be new to you. There is a world of enjoyment in coffee. Let it give the lift of living. Whoa, that's a... I feel like I'm reading a barista routine right now, frankly. Moving down, we have some maybe slightly more questionable bits of information, but I feel like these should be read to you because they're quite funny. Now, in Washington, where protocol is important, coffee is the highest ranking beverage. The hostesses must make sure, no matter what else is served, that the most important lady pours the coffee. And I need to note that most important and lady are all capitalized. So consider me today the most important lady. I will be serving all of the coffee. Anyways, it talks a little bit more about it has a little bit more like blurbs of pros, and then we move down into the kind of definitions of coffee, how to make it, and the recipes. In this one, we see 3 different types of brewing. We have the vacuum method, we have the drip method, and we also have the percolator method, which are 3 very popular, accessible home ways of brewing back in the 50s. They also have some rules, of which we should always follow when making coffee. Number 1, start with a thoroughly clean coffee maker. This is still true. This is a good rule, and we should still follow this. Number 2, fresh coffee is best. That is also pretty true. Fair enough. Number 3, fresh water is important too. Water is most of your coffee. Water is good. Fresh water is good. For best results, use the full capacity of your coffee maker. Never brew less than 3/4 of capacity. A little bit more debatable nowadays. I feel like there's a nice range of flexibility in amounts of coffee you can brew. Consistent timing is important. After you find the exact timing to obtain the results desired with your coffee maker, stick to it in order to get uniform results. I would argue that we may have moved on a little bit more to exact weight rather than exact timing, but fair enough. Have parameters, stick to them. Things are trackable and replicable if you maintain your parameters. Number 6, coffee should never be boiled. When coffee is boiled, an undesirable flavor change takes place. This is pretty true. You don't necessarily want to use boiling water with your coffee. And number 7, serve coffee as soon as possible after brewing. Freshly brewed coffee tastes best. Generally, yes. It's kind of nice to know that all of these rules are pretty much still true. You can change a lot about coffee, but the foundation is still there. All right, I'm gonna read you one more section out of this before we actually dive into the recipes. Now, there's a good cup of coffee. Those are the treasured words that every homemaker is entitled to hear with regularity. True, they must be earned, but the earning is a simple matter if you are willing to keep a few fundamentals in mind and follow them consistently. In the United States and in Canada, we're including Canada here, we like our coffee clear and fragrant, strong, but not bitter. We like our hot coffee really hot, and we like it plentiful, enough so that we can say, thanks, I will have another, when the first delicious cup is finished. On the preceding page, you'll find okay, so it goes back to the instructions. The verbiage in this book is something else, isn't it? I have a recipe that we have pulled from each of these that we're gonna make today, some lovely vintage iced coffee. So I'm gonna go get some coffee ready, and I'll see you soon. I want to give a huge thank you to Trade Coffee for sponsoring today's video. We're going to need a whole lot of coffee today, which means my most recent bag from Trade came in just in time. Trade Coffee is the coffee subscription service that makes it easy to discover new coffees and make your best cup at home every day. Trade partners with the nation's top-rated independent roasters to send you the best quality coffee you can get. And whether you know what you like or are new to specialty coffee, Trade has you covered. We've talked about a wide array of coffees from Trade, and right now I'm digging into this bag from Bean & Bean Roasters out of New York City. Bean & Bean is a mother-daughter duo that started in 2008 and focuses on bridging the gender gap in coffee throughout the supply chain. This washed Ethiopian heirloom variety is sweet with notes of honey, lemon, and jasmine, making it both delicious when hot and cold. But if the specific profile isn't for you, then Trade has you covered, with over 450 unique coffees for you to choose from. So if you're ready to get started and begin exploring all the flavors that coffee has to offer, it's a great time. Right now, Trade is offering my subscribers a free bag of coffee with any subscription at drinktrade.com/MDC. That's drinktrade.com/MDC for a free bag of coffee with any subscription purchase. Welcome back. I have still been reading since you've been gone. I also got out the blender. Now, since we have our Fun with Coffee from the 1950s out, I think we'll start here. We'll work our way back around to the 1930s. Now, there is a section in here that kind of highlights popular coffee drinks from around the world, which is rather fun, but they're ones that are pretty common nowadays. We talk about things like the cafe cappuccino. Of course, that was a very popular Italian drink that made its way over to the US. We have Turkish coffee, we have Viennese coffee, we have cafe au laits, lots of lovely things that you see in most coffee shops. Now we get to the exciting part, and in fact, it actually is called exciting. Some exciting frosty coffee recipes. I looked these all over. We're gonna make the first one listed here. We're gonna make what they're calling coffee nectar, which again, sounds like something out of a barista routine. I've got a competition on my mind, what can I say? The description of this drink is here is one of the most refreshing of frosty coffee drinks. When the weather gets really hot, some people even like it for breakfast. Here are our ingredients. They're pretty simple. We only have 3 of them. We need 2 1/4 cups of strong cold coffee. We need 1 whole tablespoon of Angostura bitters, and we need 1 pint of coffee ice cream. So let's be clear. We are making a milkshake, just so we're all on the same page here. But I've got nothing against milkshakes. I have nothing against milkshakes with coffee in them. Frankly, I'd really like one right now, so I have all the ingredients, let's make it. When in 50s America, we will measure like they did in 50s America. So we are gonna be using cups today, and no one can stop me. We'll just have to make do. There will be no weights, I don't think. We also have these bitters, and I don't know, I feel like most people know the story about why this packaging is the way that it is, with the label being very off and differently shaped than the bottle, but the going story is that 2 people basically created this. One person was in charge of the bottle, one person was in charge of the label. They, for some reason, did not sync up. The labels came in completely different sized, and they just kind of went with it. And now it's a very interesting, defining feature of their packaging. Anyways, we've got a lot of coffee and a lot of sugar that's going into this drink, so hopefully the bitters should create a nice kind of balancing agent in some form to this. The instructions are pretty simple. Place all ingredients in bowl or electric blender. This will be our blender. Beat until smooth and creamy. Pour into tall glasses. You know how much I love a simple recipe. Let's just go for it. Start with 2 1/4 cups of strong cold coffee. Now, back in the 50s, that era of coffee was not necessarily known to be very light or floral or fragrant. It was roasty and toasty and dark, and that's what we have right now. I'm gonna try to replicate this as closely as possible. 1, 2, 1/4. I need 1 tablespoon of bitters. I don't use bitters a lot, so it's gonna be kind of fun. I'm gonna have to do this over the sink. I was gonna say that we have the bitters all portioned out, but I think by spilling you can see that. Okay, in we go. Now I just have 1 whole pint of ice cream that I'm gonna put in here. Do my best to scrape this entire thing. Now, as many of you know, I am very lactose sensitive. Dairy and me, especially ice cream and whole milk and I, don't necessarily go that well together anymore. I'm doing this for you, and also a little bit for me. And if I had lactate, I'd take it, but I'm definitely out, and so I'm just gonna hope for the best in wake of today's video. That is 1 whole pint of ice cream. I do respect the attitude of saying you could just enjoy this for breakfast. I can imagine on an especially toasty day, a nice ice cream milkshake with coffee could be a pretty good way to wake up. Cover your ears, this might be loud. Nice thing about modern technology, we actually have a milkshake function. Doesn't look as thick as I was really expecting. It's a lot more watery than I think I would prefer my milkshake consistency, but actually, you know what, fair enough. This is not a milkshake. That's not what they've called it. That's what I've called it. This is coffee nectar. Let's get a glass. I'm gonna put our coffee nectar into a glass that is slightly fancy. It's not watery by any means, but it's definitely not as thick as I was expecting. I have a straw, but let's just sip. It's tasty. I mean, this is really good. Consistency-wise, this actually makes for something that's pretty drinkable. It's not as ice creamy as I was maybe expecting it to be. The amount of coffee we added definitely both loosened this up and also balanced out the amount of just sugar that's in this. You don't really get any of the kind of like flavor of bitters as you might in like a very short cocktail or mocktail or something like that. But I think it does just like help the overall profile. Look, it's 3 ingredients. It's not a complicated drink, and it is pretty good for what it is. But we've got a different, slightly more complicated drink to make next. So let's move back to the 30s, which is a sentence I will never say about anything else ever. I think looking through these sorts of old kind of relics of a time far in the past, and rightfully so, one of the most interesting things that stands out to me is that while we have found new technologies, maybe different ways to extract and like brew more efficiently, kind of the roots of our coffee preparation has always existed. And even some of the things that we call hacks or tricks nowadays are things that are not new. These are practices that have been going on for a very long time. Most notably, the one that I found in both of these books is the recommendation to make coffee ice cubes. You see this hack all over the internet, mostly in like short form video of people being like, I have a new coffee hack for you. You should just freeze your coffee into ice cubes and then it like doesn't dilute your coffee, which yes, true, but it's something we've been doing for a very, very long time. And by seeing these, it really emphasizes how long we've been doing that. Our coffee recipe section in this book, even though this is an iced coffee recipes book, is pretty short. We didn't have a lot of drinks to choose from, but I think I found the most interesting one. We're gonna make a coffee frappe. This one has a couple more ingredients. We are gonna need 2 cups of strong Chase and Sanborn's dated coffee. We're gonna need 1/4 cup of cream, I'm assuming they're talking heavy cream here. We're gonna need 1/4 cup of powdered sugar, and we're gonna need 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, along with 1 egg white. The instructions say place all ingredients and some cracked ice into a beverage shaker and shake well. Or you can beat all ingredients together with an egg beater and let it stand in the refrigerator to chill. If a richer drink is desired, the egg yolk may be added. I'm all about putting egg yolks in coffee. We're gonna add it. So let's get what we need. We have coffee, we have powdered sugar, we have heavy cream, we have ground ginger, we also have 1 egg, and a cocktail shaker, which is always a fun tool to use. This one is actually courtesy of La Marzocco Home, so fun coffee cocktail shaker. Now, this might get me yelled at a little bit, but for the life of me, I can never remember what side the ingredients go into versus what side you're supposed to put the ice into. So maybe I should just Google this. I'll be right back. Okay, a quick Google search has yielded that I'm supposed to put the ingredients in the bottom can. So let's start assembling. Starting off, 2 cups of dated coffee. Now, I am questioning whether all of our ingredients are actually gonna fit in here. We might have to cut down this recipe in half, but let's see. One half cup. 2 half cups. Looking at this, there is no way that we're fitting another cup of coffee plus a 1/4 cup of cream plus ice plus everything else in here. So I think we're gonna pare this recipe down to half. Next up, we need a 1/4 cup of cream, but cutting that in half, we're gonna use 1/8 cup of cream. Some heavy whipping cream here. In we go. This should add some nice texture and also some nice just like fattiness to this drink. Most coffee drinks are kind of a game of figuring out the balance between a sugar, a fat, and an acidity to it. We now need 1/8 cup powdered sugar. As I clean this, it's just, powdered sugar is an interesting thing, I think, to add to this beverage. It doesn't usually incorporate very well into drinks, especially cold drinks, so we'll see how this goes. My recipe doesn't instruct me to mix these ingredients prior to shaking, but I think with the ginger and the powdered sugar, we might have to in order to avoid any like major clumping after we mix. Okay, 1/8 cup powdered sugar. Now I've got an open bag of powdered sugar that I am never gonna use again, let's be totally honest. Next up, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. 1/4 teaspoon already is not a lot. We're cutting that in half, so we need 1/8 of a teaspoon. We need just like the essence of ginger in here. I don't put ginger in coffee drinks very often. I put them in some syrups perhaps, but very rarely just in a beverage, and also very rarely in its powdered form. Usually it's more of a kind of a steeping or an infusion. Smells interesting. Okay, what's left? 1 egg white. I'm getting a bowl here because we're gonna have to like split this egg white in half, otherwise we're gonna have a pretty wild texture going on. That was about half of that egg white. Now we're supposed to add ice and shake vigorously. There's nothing more humbling than using a Boston shaker in front of people who actually know how to use a Boston shaker. I really learn a lot every time I do this in public because of usually how wrong I do it and how corrected I get afterwards. That's fair. I admit my lack of knowledge here, and I'm ready to learn. So any tips, tricks, or techniques you have with a Boston shaker, I'm willing to hear you out. Also, I am team refill your ice cube tray immediately after you use it. Because we're going to need to strain this drink out with all the ice in it, I have a strainer here. And because we're straining the drink, it would be nice to use a little bit of a fancier glass. So we have this, I believe this is a coupe glass here. A little bit larger, should be fun. This always makes me nervous. Don't look at me do this. I realized mid-shake there that I said we were going to mix our ingredients before shaking. We didn't do that, in case you noticed, but our recipe did not instruct us to do that, so we're merely following the recipe. We'll find out. I'm gonna pay for that. What's also interesting about this recipe is that even though it called for an egg white, it didn't call for like a dry shake. Usually you do a shake without ice for your ingredients in order to kind of like emulsify and froth that egg before adding a bunch of ice. So see what we get here. The color looks nice. If we're not mixing, it doesn't look like we have chunks of either ginger or like powdered sugar in here. It looks pretty well emulsified together. The texture is not super thick, but then again, we have a lot of liquid, not a ton of emulsifier, so let's just try. Honestly, that's pretty good. I think the most interesting thing about this is the texture. I will say this doesn't taste like really anything more than just coffee and cream together and then shaken. The ginger that we added was quite negligible. That was not enough ginger to really impact a lot of the flavor, especially in this quantity, but the texture is kind of fun. Because we're using powdered sugar instead of a simple syrup or even a granulated sugar, there's kind of this drying feeling in the mouth, like a little bit of a cakiness. With powdered sugar, if you just eat powdered sugar, it like sticks to the roof of your mouth. It's very floury, it's powdered, you know, it's not as grainy as regular sugar. And you don't really lose that in this beverage. Like it's definitely fully dissolved and dispersed throughout the drink, but you still kind of feel like you're drinking powdered sugar. I think powdered sugar also has a pretty distinct sweetness to it as compared to other types of more whole grain sugars, and you definitely do taste that still in here. The texture is not nearly as frothy as I might have hoped with the addition of an egg white. Not as thick or interesting, but it's okay. This really just feels kind of like an elevated take. No, maybe not even elevated, a more complicated take on an iced latte. It's not bad. It is heavy cream and a lot of coffee and a lot of sugar. So can't really go wrong there. Well, this was quite a bit of fun. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly was very tickled digging into these recipe books and also digging into a little bit of the history behind them. I think it's fun to see where coffee started, how it has evolved, and how we serve it today. And while this is certainly just a very, 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 very tiny lens at how coffee was served during these times, it's kind of an interesting look. I think especially with this one, with the Fun with Coffee, which was a piece of material that was made around basically just like an ad campaign for coffee. I think it's pretty interesting to see the kind of messaging that they were pushing with how people should consume coffee back in the day. And looking through these, it makes me very, very grateful that we don't use a lot of these words or messages or any of this stuff anymore, because there is some not good stuff in here. Now, there is still plenty of not good stuff in the world, very much so, but it's nice to know that at least some of it has gone away in the past. Anyways, this was a whole lot of fun. We made some pretty tasty things, and I'm gonna go finish at least as much of the coffee nectar as I can before I know I'm gonna have a very bad time the rest of the day. My name is Morgan Drinks Coffee, pretty much anywhere you can find me online. You can find me here on YouTube once a week, plus shorts. Additionally, you can find me on Instagram or TikTok almost every single day. This was a lot of fun. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good day, everyone. Goodbye.